So you're thinking about a career as a motor vehicle engine inspector. Interesting. We're diving deep into that today. You've given us some great RoleCatcher resources to use. We'll break down the job itself, what it actually entails, the skills you'd need to succeed, and even what a potential career path could look like. So, ready to get started?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so when someone says motor vehicle engine inspector, what's the first thing that pops into your head?
Most people, I think they picture someone just looking at engines all day long, right?
Mhm.
But as we'll see, there's a lot more to it.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So let's unpack that. What does an engine inspector actually do daily? I mean, beyond just the looking at engines part, obviously.
Well, imagine this. You're in a busy factory, surrounded by machinery, hearing those sounds all around you. And you're not just inspecting cars. We're talking diesel engines, gas, petrol, even electric. Cars, buses, trucks, you name it.
Wow, so there's a lot more variety in the types of engines you could be working on than I would have guessed.
Absolutely. And even beyond the types of engines, RoleCatcher also gets into the different types of inspections you do.
Oh, interesting. Like what?
Well, routine checkups, of course, those are a given. But then you have post-overhaul inspections, making sure an engine's good to go after a major repair. Pre-availability inspections, those are crucial, before a brand new vehicle hits the road for the first time. And get this, they even do post-casualty examinations.
Whoa, so you're almost like an engine detective in those post-casualty situations, trying to figure out what went wrong. That's a whole other side I hadn't even considered.
Exactly. It's not just are those engines running, but are they running safely and efficiently? It's a big responsibility.
It sounds like it. Now, speaking of responsibility, RoleCatcher also talks about the work environment, and it sounds like it might not always be a spotless garage with all the latest tools. Is that right?
That's right. I mean, there are definitely high-tech aspects to the job, don't get me wrong, but you also need to be prepared for some, shall we say, less glamorous conditions. It could be noisy, dirty, cramped. Safety's a huge deal, so you're often decked out in protective gear.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially when you're dealing with powerful machinery, potentially hazardous materials. It's not always gleaming chrome and futuristic engines like you see in the movies then, huh?
Definitely not. But that's part of what makes it interesting, right? There's a real hands-on, practical element to the job. And it's not just about the engines themselves either. RoleCatcher really emphasizes communication and collaboration. You'll be interacting with all sorts of people, administrative staff, the maintenance and repair crews, you name it.
So you need those people skills too. Being able to explain your findings clearly, work well as part of a team.
Exactly. It's a multifaceted role. You need that blend of technical expertise and then those interpersonal skills to really succeed.
So we've talked about what it's really like to be a motor vehicle engine inspector day to day, but let's switch gears a bit. Would this even be a good fit for you? Considering the pros and cons, thankfully RoleCatcher dives into that too.
Right. Got to weigh both sides before jumping into any new career.
Exactly. So let's start positive. What are some of the perks? What makes this job appealing?
Well, RoleCatcher points out job stability. That's a big one for a lot of people.
Makes sense.
The demand for engine inspectors, people who really know their stuff, is pretty consistent. Because think about it, vehicles are always going to need maintenance, repairs, right?
That's a really good point. Doesn't matter how much tech advances, we're going to need skilled people to keep those engines running.
Precisely. And speaking of tech, that's another pro. The field's always evolving, which if you're into constantly learning, staying ahead of the curve, that's exciting, right?
Oh, for sure.
You can even specialize in something. Become the go-to person for a specific type of engine. Like imagine being an expert in, say, the electric powertrains of those new EVs everyone's talking about.
Right. So it's more than just turning wrenches. You get to be at the forefront of automotive technology. Plus, RoleCatcher mentioned good pay. Can't forget that.
Absolutely. And remember we touched on those alternative job titles earlier.
Oh, yeah. Like,
Marine engineering technician,
yeah.
aircraft engine inspector, things like that. Those often come with even more specialized knowledge and, yeah, potentially higher salaries too.
Yeah. So there's definitely room to grow, explore different avenues within this one field. But in the spirit of balance, got to be real about the downsides too. RoleCatcher didn't shy away from those.
Nope, they covered those as well. Like we mentioned before, the work environment. It can be demanding. Not always going to be a pristine, sparkling clean garage.
Right.
You might be dealing with loud noises, dirt, grease, potentially hazardous materials even. You got to be okay with that.
Yeah, and it's physically demanding too, isn't it? On your feet a lot, maybe lifting heavy equipment, getting into awkward positions to inspect those engines. Not exactly a desk job.
You got it. And while that job stability is a plus, there can also be pressure. deadlines to meet. Got to make sure those engines are safe and compliant with all the regulations.
Right.
Not a career for someone who, can't handle a little stress.
You need that meticulousness, attention to detail, being able to stay focused even when things get hectic.
Exactly. You're the last line of defense against a faulty engine, causing serious problems down the line.
Whoa.
No pressure.
Yeah, that's a big responsibility.
It is. But incredibly rewarding, too, knowing you're helping keep people safe.
So we've covered what the job's like day to day, the good stuff, the not so good stuff. But what about the long game? I know you're all about that continuous learning. Is this one of those careers where you're stuck at inspector level forever, or is there room to grow?
That's where those RoleCatcher career stage breakdowns are really helpful. It's definitely not a dead-end job. There's a clear path for those who want to move up.
Okay, good to know. So walk me through it. What does that progression typically look like?
Well, you usually start as an entry-level inspector, of course. Lots of learning the ropes, assisting more experienced colleagues, probably handling a lot of the routine inspections early on.
Yeah, paying your dues, getting that hands-on experience, but it's not like you're stuck there forever, right?
Oh, no, not at all. Once you've got some experience under your belt, you'd move up to a junior inspector role. That's where you start taking on more responsibility, doing more independent inspections. You might even start handling some of those post-overhaul checks, pre-availability inspections, the more specialized ones we talked about.
Ah, so more variety in the work, higher stakes too, I imagine. I'm guessing the salary gets a nice bump around this stage too.
One would hope so. And it keeps climbing from there. Hone those skills, prove your expertise, and you could become a senior inspector. At that level, you're not just doing the inspections, you're overseeing others, mentoring junior staff, making sure the whole inspection process runs smoothly.
So that leadership aspect starts coming into play more and more. It's not just about your individual technical skills anymore, but also about managing people and processes.
Exactly. And according to RoleCatcher, the peak is the lead inspector position. Now you're heading up a whole team, making those big picture decisions, even collaborating with higher-ups on a management level.
Wow, quite a journey. It really sounds like you can go far in this field if you've got the drive. And it's not just about the experience you get on the job, is it? RoleCatcher mentions staying updated on technology certifications.
It's essential, really. Think about it. Engine tech is constantly evolving, right? New fuel systems, electric vehicles, who knows what we'll be driving in 10 years. You've got to keep learning to stay on top of your game.
So that could mean on-the-job training, getting those ASE certifications we hear about, maybe even going for a higher education degree if you're really ambitious.
Exactly. It all ties back to that love of lifelong learning you were talking about. In this field, that curiosity, that commitment to expanding your knowledge, it's not just a bonus, it's a requirement.
I love that. Speaking of requirements, let's give our listeners some practical tips for, say, acing that job interview. RoleCatcher provides some sample interview questions, and I've got to say, some of these are pretty tough. They really make you think beyond just the technical stuff.
They do. It's a glimpse into the kind of decision-making, problem-solving skills you need in the real world.
Like, there's one that asks, how do you prioritize your workload when you've got multiple engines to inspect, all with different deadlines? I mean, talk about pressure. That's time management organization.
Thinking on your feet, just like you would on the job. Or how about this one? Tell me about a time you had to make a tough call during an inspection. Maybe you weren't sure if an engine was safe to run or needed more work.
Oh, that's a good one. It gets at your judgment, how you assess risk, because it's not always going to be a clear-cut answer, right?
Absolutely not. And that highlights something else too, the ethical considerations of this job.
It's not just about the machines, right?
Right. You're making decisions that impact people's safety, their livelihoods even.
That's a heavy responsibility. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of motor vehicle engine inspectors, it's clear this isn't just a job, it's a career. It's about more than just knowing your engines. It's about problem solving, thinking critically, and making decisions that matter. And who knows, maybe this deep dive has sparked an interest in something you hadn't even considered before. Whether it's cars, boats, planes, or even those trains we see chugging along, the skills you learn as an engine inspector can take you to some pretty fascinating places. So keep exploring, keep learning, and who knows what incredible opportunities you might discover.